Welcome back, Grind Forest gamers. Here again with another exciting Street Fighter Duel video. On the call we have Nova. How you doing, Nova?
Doing well, thank you. How about yourself?
Doing great. So what we're looking at here is a tier list with all the C3 fighters on the screen. So what are your initial thoughts about this tier list, Nova, and what can we discern from this?
Well, that's an amazing question because I feel like we've kind of been asking ourselves that same question the whole time we've been putting this together. Is like, what does this list even mean?
Yeah, right.
And I think it really comes down to a tier list based on like clarity of use when it comes to fighters, and that's because we're at a point in the game right now where we're using multiple teams for almost everything,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to be sure that you are getting the biggest punch that you can get. And I believe that the way things are going for the game right now is you need to be building your teams around your DPS unit.
Yeah,
And when you're doing that, you need to be making sure that what what combo move, what attack that you're using from them is actually associated with their entire kit so you get the most benefit for it.
that's exactly. And for example, some people might think, oh well, C Viper is down in A. What the heck, guys? She's like the best unit in the game. And I'd agree with you. I think she is the best unit in the game. However,
Yeah,
her C3 doesn't directly reflect all the cool things that she's bringing to the table.
correct.
It doesn't work off of her armor energy, which is kind of her shtick if you look into her kit and her C
Right.
or her fighting spirit. And,
And it's also for her kind of predicated on the fact that you're using her with BZ, right? Because
yeah,
she's doing an AoE kick almost identical in appearance to Guile's.
right.
But without BZ, you're not guaranteed to hit everyone. And the difference between her and Guile, because I think you can make this direct comparison between the two, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, because when it comes to like straight up DPS, like these are the two that are really bringing it to the table.
Yeah.
Guile's C3 functions on his saber, which is built off of his super.
Yeah, well, he's the only one giving Saber out, so you
Right.
kind of need Guile to be the super and C3, the
Right.
main
Yep.
functionality of that damage dealing team.
Well, and he can gain saber from allies using ranged attacks,
Right.
but but the point here is that his C3 is based 100% off of his kit, which is what we see in his passive. We see this with his vehicles. We see this with his FS. We
Yep.
don't see that directly for C Viper.
We don't. And same thing with a unit like Sagat. Like everything about Sagat is based off of doing as many Tiger Cannons as possible.
Correct.
His cars speak to it. His FS speaks to it. His C3 speaks to it. It's just what he's trying to do. So if you're using
Right.
Sagat and not using his C3, then there might be another fighter that you could sub in that could be better if you were relying for
Right.
his C1. But
Correct.
that's kind of
And
where
I think
this top tier lies. Like it's a
right.
use case scenario. So it's a team building
Right.
composition scenario.
And I want to touch on something that you just said because I think it was just perfectly stated.
Yeah.
If you're not using Sagat C3, you might want to be using someone else. That is exactly what this list is about.
Yep.
These are the fires where if you have them on the field, you're not using their C3, you're doing something wrong. Your team is not built correctly.
Correct. Yep. Exactly. And some of these fighters, I think, need to see their day. Meaning, I don't think the game has released Poison's best friend yet. You know,
Agreed.
I and
Agreed.
and I think Chun Li, she could see a better use case, maybe even on a boss damage dealing team.
Yeah.
But the problem is her C3 just doesn't hold a candle to the other abilities from of the other fighters on this list. Like
Right.
it doesn't directly work toward her from her kit.
Agreed.
It's just nice damage. But
And
it's
that's something to keep in mind because I know people are using Chun-Li against
mm-hmm,
bosses and they're seeing good results. And that's fine. You know,
mm-hmm,
if that's someone that you have built for you that's doing well for you, that's great. But there you need to really think about the use case. Is
mm-hmm.
her C3 overall better than Guile's? The answer is no.
No, it's not. It's just not gonna do it. Um,
Yeah.
and same thing with like Dulcim. Like Dulcine's C3 is really awesome because it fit with Fashion Blanca, and everybody was like, "Oh my
Yep.
goodness, the Dulcine Fashion Blanca combo is just so good," and it is, and people use it, and people will
Amazing.
use it.
It's
Um,
great for Shadowlands. It's great for bosses. It's great for campaign. It's great for PvP. I
it's
mean,
it's everything that Dulcine's trying to do.
it's
He's
amazing.
stacking that penance on himself. He's doing the idle bouncing, which gives him stat boosts, and then he just
Yep.
knocks him down with that C3. His C3 is why he's on the field.
And
Um,
his FS correlates directly with his C3 as well, increasing how much burn he stacks.
yeah,
So
eh,
you have to use it, otherwise you're negating his FS 30.
exactly. So, and then you look at someone like Vega, where Vega is all about this sublime bleed, and there
Yep.
are FS and car skills that speak to his sublime bleed. The only way you're getting his sublime bleed is through his C3. So if you're using him, you better be using that C3, or else you're just not unlocking
Correct.
his full potential of his kit.
Correct.
And so
And
therefore he's
Vega's
an
a
S.
he's a good one to talk about too, because we don't have the newest fighters on here, right? You might be looking at this and saying like, "Oh, Fashion Ken's not on this list. He's about
Yep.
to come out yet."
Yep.
Or you might look down here and see Virgil and say he's got a C3. Okay, well, do you have Virgil? Is he usable?
The
He
answer is
doesn't. He
no.
doesn't make the list, you know.
Yeah.
So as far as like Vega goes with Fashion Ken, because I made a video about this just a couple days ago. I'll put a card up here at the top for you guys. You can check it out. It's about my testing for Fashion Ken and how I don't think currently in the current meta, I don't think that he's good. And my concern is that it's what DatSkat was saying earlier. We don't have a team built
Mm-hmm.
for this yet. He's not. I can tell you now, Fashion Ken's not going to do it for you in arena. He's not going to do it for you in PVE in the stories. He's not going to. He's not going to carry you in those places. He's likely a boss unit, but he doesn't mesh with the combo chains of the other fighters that you'd think he'd be good with. Now, if Vega's C2 was doing bleed and Sublime Bleed, or one or the other, now we can talk. But
I
he goes against that build.
Yep. So
So
maybe he doesn't have his team yet, and that's kind of the point
right,
here. Is like some of the like, and when I was building this list, just going through the gallery, pulling out all the fighters who even have a C3, I was kind of shocked at how small the list was. Like,
yeah,
just thinking, sitting back thinking, well, every single team that you're going to put together is going to have one of these fighters in it.
right. Well, and we saw that with HWA, right?
Yeah.
Just recently, like this is what we saw in HWA. You know, we had like different tanks supplemented in, but you know they're not on this list obviously because they don't have C3s. But this is what you're seeing for damage. You're seeing Viper, Guile. You're seeing Dulcine. I didn't really see any Vegas, but you're seeing Sagat for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of course, Bison's in there. He's just like a good default C3. We put him in A not because his C3 is incredible or anything, but it's like sometimes it rounds a team out. And also, if your C3 gets knocked, he immediately fills that. He's just good, you know,
It's
overall.
it's kind of an interesting play because nobody's running his C3 by choice. It's just like, well,
Right.
it makes the, a Fashion Blanca B Zangief team well
Sure.
rounded because you can still have the
Sure.
C1 from somebody else. So you could do
Yep.
Fashion
Exactly.
Blanca, somebody C1 that's buffing, B Zangief for speed, and then just running Bison C3 just because it works, you
Right.
know. But I'm not like trying to build a team around using his C3. And
No.
I've always
No.
found
Not at
that
all.
his C3 kind of puts him out of position. Like I want him
Yeah.
out front taking damage.
Right. Yeah, I can sometimes make your other fighters like jump out in front, and then he backs up, and then you end up having your DPS units just like way out in front.
Yep.
It does happen sometimes, but it's a nice like default too.
Well, and we were talking earlier, and sometimes, let's say your damage dealer gets knocked out. Well, it's kind of nice to be able to have Bison to fill that role if need be.
Correct.
There are
Correct.
far more C2 and C1 fighters than there are C3 fighters, so
Right.
having him out there just as a backup plan. But ideally, if you're going to be winning these matches, your plan's going to be working, right? It's not like, oh,
Correct.
I glad I had that backup plan in there.
Yeah,
Like,
right. I'm glad Bison C3 triggered there.
and
I don't know
and
if I've ever said that, but yeah,
yeah.
it's good to have it available. But these other fighters, I just want to address E Honda here because
Hmm.
I think you could argue he'd go higher, but the thing is, it's so conditional.
Hmm.
First off, you got to be fighting against a team with projectiles, and and secondly, sometimes I feel like it doesn't work. I feel like he still takes damage, and sometimes like against a Guile team, you're not interrupting, right? So his saber is like a AoE. The explosion, I believe, still hits, and if another fighter jumps in front of it, they're gonna get hit too.
Well, and that's the thing.
I
It's
don't
like
know.
let's say it's off of his C3 that you throw up a bullet wall. And yeah, I think with
Right,
his FS and with his cars, there's additional bullet walls going up. I think at the
right,
beginning of the battle and whatever the case.
yeah,
But the battle's pushing and pulling away forward and away from this bullet wall that gets put up. So like,
right.
what are the chances that bullet wall is actually going to be where you need it to be?
Right.
I
I find it too often I see a fighter jump in front of it.
I do too, and
Um,
it's kind of frustrating. But I think in the
yeah.
early game, there's some use case there, just to help you
He's a
get
great
through some
counter for
other
Mad
things.
Ryu.
Yeah. So if you have a
But Mad Ryu
situation,
falls off so hard. Like you don't see Mad Ryu in PvP, do you? I mean,
no, I
maybe
don't.
maybe we're well, I don't, I can't speak for every viewer here. Not everyone's at the same, position in the game as we are, but I don't see it. I don't see him at all.
Not kind of this late into the game.
No.
Um, uh, he's a fighter that if you build him, that's great. You could build him through to your limit break, to the 240 cap. That's great.
Yeah.
You're gonna find value there, but then he's gonna start falling off pretty hard. So
Sure.
I kind of like on my little restart experiment account, I went straight in for Guile. Like I knew who I needed to build, and I kind of went straight in for Guile. And it's been a little rocky getting him to where he needs to be to shine, but
Yeah.
what I saw that as is a head start into getting my teams that I knew were going to produce.
Right.
So I was fine lagging a couple days here and there by not building someone like Mad Ryu, just so I could
Right.
devote everything into Guile so that when I do hit those stages in the game, I'm already ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Guile just outperforms most fighters in this game.
Yep. But not for bosses, which brings up somebody like Cammy, regular Cammy.
Right.
Like, why in the
Yeah.
world is she up here on this list? Well, we started reading her kit, and we're like, oh
Yeah.
wow, like there's an armor breaking situation going on here that's totally
Hmm.
exploitable, you know.
Correct.
And we were
And her
even
FS30 works perfectly off of it as well, so it validates using her C3 and even her super, especially if you're going to push her to FS30.
we're gonna have situations here where we're not only needed to have an HWA, it's a PvP setup, but and there
Hmm.
are certain events here that are coming out where it's like you need 3 boss fighting teams or
Yeah.
3 single target, boss fighting teams, and Trendy Cammy is gonna be on one of them at least. I
Right.
think now, especially free to play, because you can get her in those chests. There's
Yep.
going to be enough players that are going to build her, so she's a viable free to play fighter these days. She's going to
Yeah.
be one of your teams, and I think Cammy's the other team. And since Guile doesn't necessarily excel with regard to boss fights,
Right.
you could justify using his C1 just to
Right.
stack armor break for
Sure.
Cammy.
Sure.
Um,
Why not?
well, I think the use case would be maybe you need some shielding or you need some healing, and then you need Elena or
Hmm.
whatever. But then you put Chung
Maybe.
Li in the C
Maybe.
two, and you're off to the races. Like I think
Yeah.
Cammy will deliver a ton of damage, but with this video and this tier list, it was about like, okay, does their C3 work for their kit? Like, is it designed to
Yes.
work? Is it necessary?
Yep.
And all those fighters in S, it's like pretty darn clear that it's absolutely necessary to be using their C3. Like this is how they
Yep.
work.
It is the most important aspect of their kit, and that's truly what puts them in S.
Yep.
Because you can't say that about the others.
You
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 just can't say
cannot.
that about the others. But this top list here, like if you're looking at who to build and you want to stay free to play, like you've got three normal faction fighters right up here in the top. You've got Dulcim, you've got Guile, you've got Cammy.
Mm-hmm.
Dulcim's good in every mode. Guile's good in every mode. He maybe falls off a little bit against bosses, I don't know. It's tough to say. Every boss is different too. So Cammy is very specific to bosses, but she can be very. I've seen her used very well in PvP though, because if you have the right team and you're not going up against a bison, like she's just gonna take chunks of health away from people.
Big chunks, and she
She
has
deals
some
a
trigger
lot of
skills
damage.
going on too,
Yep.
which is really nice. So like she has additional use case for being on the field, whereas
Right.
if like you're just putting somebody else in a C2, just subbing them into the lineup, if they don't necessarily have a passive that helps the team out in another way, there just
Right.
might be a better fighter to put in there. That's kind of a great segue to talk about these trigger skill heroes down there.
Sure.
Like Evo Ryu has a C3, but you're not like building a team around his use of a C3.
Right.
Like
Because you have to use somebody else's C3, which is another validation for having him
Bison.
with Bison, because you can use his C3 and then get the trigger skill for Evil Ryu. But yeah, you can't really. I don't feel like it's fair to slot either of them
No,
into an actual grade because it's done automatically. And for another reason here, MH Ken is just not available to everyone.
he's just not available.
So
Like he's
yeah, I
just not
mean,
there.
he does it. It's great. They both have amazing C3s, but they're getting used automatically. So you're not really purposefully slotting that. But yeah, I mean, I think this list is really cool because as long as you're taking from this list to a degree, either whether it's from S or from A, the fighters that you have available to you, if you're taking one of these fighters and that's the first person that you drag up and place into your lineup, you're already doing the right thing. Get
Yep.
them there, and then start looking at the rest of the fighters that you have available to you that either buff them, help them do what their kit wants to see done, whether that's like more armor breaking or more burn,
Mm-hmm.
and try to like augment that and increase that with other fighters, and then look at your survivability,
Yeah.
right? And then now you're looking at building a team that's not only going to like hold up well over the time frame of a fight, but you're going to be getting the highest damage that you can out of that team.
Yeah, and it's really true. Like if you're using a Sagat team, like survivability with Sagat himself isn't really a problem.
Correct.
But if you're using a trendy cami, survivability is a little bit of an issue. So you might need to put a C3 in there, or I'm sorry, a C1 in there to help her out. Like kind of
Right.
fill the holes of her kit. But her damage
Correct.
is so high that it kind of warrants, the necessity of having to fill her kit.
Right. And that's the perfect point right there is Trendy Cammy's doing so much damage. If you put her in your lineup, all you got to do is figure out how to make her do more and how to keep her alive.
Yep.
And there's your team.
So
It's
can I get
simple.
shock from from somebody else, and I need to keep her alive? Those are the two
Correct.
questions you got to answer when using Trendy Cami.
Correct.
Because you will be using her super and you will be using her C3. I can guarantee you
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm glad that we did this list because it's weird how the concept of it evolved ever since we started like putting this together. Like
Yeah.
we had so many different like ideas of how like what the point of this list would be, but ultimately it just comes down to like how are you putting your team together? Where does your composition come from? So I don't know about the rest of you out there, but I was already kind of doing this anyway. I was already putting in like DPS first and then being like, how do I make this better?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of the problem solving of the game. It makes it really
Yeah.
interesting. And, like, I wish this worked a little bit better, but it's kind of hard to test without having all the fighters fully leveled and all of their FS30s unlocked and all of the vehicles unlocked. But,
Right.
I'm not advocating for this team lineup, but it's an interesting thing to think about if you did like C Viper combo hitting the back line, a super combo,
Okay.
and then did like Decapre, which would hit the lowest health person, which would be the person that C Viper hit with a super,
Okay.
which would be back line. And then you did Guy, who C2 attacks the back line, and then C Viper's C3. And I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, that's a lot of damage to one person targeted.
Sure.
That might be the linchpin of their team.
Sure.
However,
Hey, if that happens to take out their high DPS unit, then that's incredible.
it's a little conditional, and I don't
Yeah.
have them all built up enough. I'm not advocating for the team. I'm just saying this list helped me see that as a potential team
Right.
variation that you could use. Like, but it's all because you're trying to do something. Like, and with that team, I'm trying to take out their back line as fast as possible.
Correct.
You know, with a Sagat team, I'm trying to out survive you and throw up as many Tiger Cans as I can, and it's gonna be hard for you to beat me. Like I'm trying to do something with that. With Trendy Cami, I'm trying to stack
Right.
shock. I'm trying to
Yep.
hit crits. You
Yep.
know, like with Cami, I'm trying to kill the boss. I'm trying to stack armor break. Like
Right.
like you're
It's
trying to do
it's good
something.
to see. It's just good. You're right. It's good to look at this list because how many fighters do you have that are like really good, and you put the team together, and it's like you don't have a C3.
It's just yeah, or it just
You're
doesn't
like,
have
huh?
it doesn't
I
quite
don't.
work like it read or you
Right.
know. And like let's quit we got to bring this video to an end here, but Yuri, like
Hmm.
if her kit worked well, that'd be great.
Right. But
But
you probably want to slot her C1 anyway because that's where you get the interrupt.
yeah.
So you can't use a C1 and a C3, right? So
Yeah, and you can't use a super C1.
right. Correct.
Well, that about wraps it up, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed checking out this video with us. I know we had a lot of fun making this video.
For
Please
sure.
remember to like and subscribe if you found value here, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Cheers.